My name is Walter Emmett Caldwell. I'm 83 years old, and I've been sitting in this chair for about 20 minutes now, trying to figure out where to start. Because when you get to this age, you realize that starting is the hardest part. Not because you don't know what to say, but because you know that once you say it, it becomes real in a way it wasn't before. So, I'm going to say it. There was a woman named Iris, and I loved her for 41 years without ever being allowed to. I want to be careful with that word allowed because it sounds like I'm blaming someone. I'm not anymore. I stopped doing that somewhere around my 75th birthday when I realized that blame was just grief wearing an angry coat. But I want to tell you about her. I want to tell you about what happened and what didn't happen, and what I understand now that I didn't understand then. Not because I think it will help you with anything, just because I'm 83, and I have a cough that started in October and hasn't left, and I think it's important that this story exists somewhere outside of my chest. I grew up in a small town in eastern Tennessee, the kind of place where everybody knew the color of your front door and the business of your family going back 3 generations. My father worked the rail yards. My mother took in laundry and made it feel dignified. We weren't poor in the way that breaks you. We were poor in the quiet way, where you just don't speak about certain things, and you learn early that wanting too much is its own kind of embarrassment. I was the kind of boy who read too much and talked too little. Teachers liked me. Other boys didn't quite know what to do with me. That's fine. I didn't quite know what to do with myself either. I left for the Army at 19, came back at 22 feeling like a stranger in the town where I'd grown up, which I think happens to most men who go away and see things. You come back and the streets are the same, but you are not. And that gap between you and the familiar is something you spend years trying to close. I never quite closed it. I met Iris in the autumn of 1963. I was 23, she was 21. She was standing outside the Five and Dime on Millbrook Street, and I remember thinking, not that she was beautiful, though she was. I remember thinking that she laughed like someone who wasn't performing it, like it came from somewhere real. That sounds like a small thing, but I had been around enough people by then to know that real laughter, the kind that doesn't check itself, is rarer than most people think. Her name was Iris Beaumont. Her family had been in that town longer than mine. Her father ran the hardware store. Her mother was the kind of woman who organized church events and made everyone feel slightly judged while being completely polite about it. They were a respected family, and they were white. I want to say that plainly and let it sit there for a moment, because in 1963 in eastern Tennessee, that sentence was not a small thing. It was not a footnote. It was the entire architecture of what was possible and what was not. I am a black man. I was a black man in 1963 in a town that had its own particular arrangements about what that meant and who you could sit near and who you could speak to and how long you were allowed to look. And I looked at Iris Beaumont for a second longer than I should have, and she looked back. That was how it began. We didn't begin in any dramatic way. There was no sweeping moment, no rebellion, no declaration. It was small things, the way most real things are. She came into the diner where I worked the lunch counter on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and she always sat at the end, and she always ordered the same thing, black coffee and a piece of whatever pie was left over from the morning. And after a few weeks, she started talking to me. Not about anything important, about the weather,
about a book she'd been reading, about the fact that the radio in the diner played the same 3 songs in rotation, and didn't we think that was something close to a punishment? I laughed. She laughed. And I knew, even then, that I was walking toward something I shouldn't be walking toward. I knew it the way you know when you're standing at the edge of a high place and you feel that strange pull. Not because you want to fall, but because part of you wonders what it would feel like to stop being afraid. We became friends the way people do when they're both pretending they're only friends. She told me about her life, about how she wanted to study literature, but her father thought it was impractical, about her younger sister who had married too young and seemed slightly defeated by it already, about how she felt sometimes like she was living inside a picture of a life rather than an actual one. I told her things too, things I hadn't told other people, about the army, about the 2 men I'd seen die, and the way that changes the color of ordinary days, about my mother, who I missed with a sharpness that hadn't dulled at all. We talked the way people talk when they have found someone who listens without already knowing what they're going to say next. And then, one afternoon, in November, she put her hand over mine on the counter, just for a moment, and then she took it away, and neither of us said anything about it. I want to stop here for a moment, because when I think about that afternoon now, I think about all the things that lived inside that gesture, the courage of it, the fear of it, the weight of what it meant for her to do that, and what it meant for me to receive it and not pull away. We were 2 people who understood without saying it that we had found something real. And we were 2 people who understood without saying it that real wasn't the same as possible. Not there, not then. Her father found out in the spring. I don't know exactly how. Small towns have their own nervous system. Word moves through them in ways that have nothing to do with anyone deciding to speak. He came to the diner on a Wednesday morning when I was the only one there setting up, and he stood across the counter from me, and he was very calm about it. He didn't threaten me, I want to be honest about that. He was not the villain of some simple story. He just looked at me and said that very quietly that he knew I was a decent young man, that he had no personal ill feeling toward me, and that his daughter would not be coming back to the diner, and that he hoped I understood. I said I understood. I didn't understand at all. I didn't see Iris for 3 months. I thought about her every day. I thought about her in the way you think about something when you're trying not to think about it, which is the most complete kind of thinking there is. I heard from someone that her parents were arranging for her to spend time with the son of a family from the next county, a good family, a suitable one. I told myself it was better this way. I told myself a lot of things. Iris came to find me in August. I was sitting on the steps outside my cousin's house in the early evening, and I looked up and she was standing at the end of the path. She had walked there, alone, in the heat. She looked like someone who had been arguing with herself for a long time and finally decided to stop. She sat down beside me on those steps, and she said, "I don't want to disappear from your life." And I said, "Iris, I don't think we have a choice." And she said, "We always have a choice. We just don't always have the courage." She was right. I knew she was right. I think I knew it the moment she said it. But I was 24 years old, and I was afraid. Not just of what other people would do. I was afraid of what wanting something impossible does to a person when it fails. I had seen my father want things that couldn't happen. I had watched it hollow him out slowly over years. And I think I'd decided somewhere, without fully deciding it, that the safest thing was to not want what you couldn't have. So I told her that I cared about her too much to ask her to walk into something that would cost her everything. And she looked at me for a long moment, and she said, "You don't get to decide what I'm willing to pay." And then she left, and I let her. That is the sentence I have carried for 60 years, and I let her. After Iris left that evening, I told myself for a long time that I had done the right thing, the protective thing, the realistic thing. I was good at finding words for what I did. I stayed in that town for another 2 years. I saw her occasionally, the way you see someone in a small place when you're both trying not to, across a street, through a window, in that particular way where you both look away at the same moment, and the looking away tells you everything. In 1965, I moved to Cincinnati for work, a factory job first, then eventually a position at the Postal Service where I stayed for 31 years. I made a life, a real one, a decent one. I married a woman named Gloria in 1970. She was kind and funny, and she deserved better than a man who was always in some small and guilty corner of himself somewhere else. We were married for 14 years before she asked me, gently, whether I